Imagine a future world where the oceans resemble gigantic boiling cauldrons, so hot and toxic that marine life struggles to adapt and survive every single day. The heat penetrates to unimaginable depths, preventing the water from holding enough oxygen to sustain life. Meanwhile, at the poles, the ice is melting at an alarming pace. Sea levels are rising and entire cities are swallowed. Yet that is only a small fragment of the nightmare. On land, people are scorched alive by waves of heat, each one leaving thousands more unable to endure. Our bodies simply cannot cope with such extreme pressure and temperature. Climate shifts cause erratic rainfall, leading to constant flooding, while storms grow increasingly violent and destructive. You see, changes in climate, especially in temperature, can unleash devastating consequences. This has led many to wonder, can humanity truly survive in a collapsing world like this? The truth is, our planet has already endured climate events far more terrifying than the scenario just described. And as you've seen, life always finds a way to adapt. Among the most remarkable examples of adaptation come from our own ancestors. In earlier epochs, they miraculously survived cataclysmic events, such as the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. Yet surviving until today required even greater resilience. On a planet in constant flux, adaptation is the key to survival. That decisive factor will be revealed in greater detail over the next 30 minutes. History of Humanity. Episode 3. Earth's Climate Through the Ages. Adapt or Die. Note: this is part of our series on human history in the broader context of Earth's history, based on the theory of evolution. Now let us begin. In January 1987, a strange deep blue ship anchored in Antarctic waters. What set it apart from other vessels was its towering 62-meter structure. Above deck, instead of sails, stood a massive drill pipe capable of reaching depths of more than 8,000 meters. Originally designed as an oil drilling ship, it was now on a scientific mission to probe the Earth for knowledge, not fuel. Its target was not the water itself, but the layers of sediment lying deep beneath. On board, 25 scientists awaited as the drill was lowered. First, it had to pass through 300 meters of water before reaching sediment. Over the next 27 hours, it cut through geological strata, extracting precious samples of ancient mud and rock. Among them was one layer that drew special attention, a thin reddish clay, just 20 centimeters thick. It stood out sharply against the surrounding gray-green sediments. Yet this modest red layer proved the existence of a remarkable climatic period, one that had occurred 56 million years ago. At that time, Antarctica's average temperature was around 15 degrees C, vastly different from the frozen wasteland we know today. Fossils from Antarctic coastal islands reveal a lush land filled with ferns, conifers, and flowering plants. The shores teemed with life, from temperate forests to diverse animals sharing the same habitat, including the earliest primates, our distant ancestors. But how can researchers reconstruct such a vivid picture of climate and ecosystems from something as simple as a sediment layer? How do they know how climate once shifted and how it shaped life? Much of our earliest understanding of climate change came from fossils, especially plant fossils. As early as the 11th century, a Chinese scholar named Shen Kuo, a pioneering geologist, studied strange imprints and fossilized plants found in landslides near riverbanks. Among them were fossilized bamboo, inexplicably buried in regions far too arid for bamboo to grow. Shen concluded that the area must once have had a warm, humid climate, much like subtropical forests today. This insight revealed an essential truth. Whenever fossils appear in places where such life no longer exists, they are evidence of past climates that allowed them to thrive. Fossils not only show us what ecosystems once existed, but also provide clues about temperature, rainfall, and other environmental conditions. One of the most important fossil sites lies in Messel, Germany. Millions of years ago, it was a lush subtropical forest, with average annual temperatures far above freezing. Strangely, despite the warmth, the site preserved fossils in extraordinary detail. The secret lay in the fine mud at the bottom of ancient lakes, similar to the red clay in Antarctica. Among the fossils found at Messel were primitive horses, turtles, and primates, evidence of a thriving ecosystem much like the warmer Antarctic shores of the past. Yet two fossils stood out as especially significant: palm leaves and crocodiles. Palm leaves suggest a tropical paradise. Palms generally only grow in regions where the coldest annual temperature is around 10 degrees, never cold enough to freeze, even in winter. Crocodiles, being cold-blooded reptiles, rely on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature, and their eggs require relatively warm conditions to hatch. The presence of both palms and crocodiles is undeniable proof that the climate of the region was once very warm. Clearly, this was a world in which animals, including our primate ancestors, lived without facing the climate challenges we fear today. But knowing that average temperatures were once so high is only part of the story. The bigger question remains, why did the climate become that warm in the first place? Why is it that the climate, landscapes, and ecosystems here are no longer as diverse as they once were? Climate can change, and for a long time we had no way of understanding how such changes occurred, until 1824, when the French scientist Joseph Fourier published his theory. He argued that the atmosphere itself could retain heat. This discovery was based on his understanding of a special kind of energy that we now call infrared radiation. Infrared radiation is emitted by the sun or any object with high temperature. Its wavelengths are invisible to the human eye and travel more slowly through the atmosphere. That is why our planet retains heat from the sun, instead of losing it back into space. In other words, our atmosphere functions like a greenhouse keeping the Earth warm. But what does this have to do with climate change? If the atmosphere retains heat so well, shouldn't Earth have been warm for billions of years? The answer lies in fluctuations in Earth's temperature. The composition of the atmosphere determines whether the Earth warms or cools. Not long after Fourier's theory, another breakthrough came from the American scientist Eunice Foote. Her seemingly simple experiment brought astonishing results. She prepared 3 sealed glass tubes filled with different gases, CO2, water vapor, and nitrogen. She placed thermometers inside each tube and exposed them to sunlight. After a while, the temperatures in all tubes rose, but CO2 heated up the fastest and the most. Even more striking, once the tubes were removed from sunlight, CO2 also cooled the slowest. This experiment revealed that CO2 has the strongest impact on environmental temperature. The more CO2 in the atmosphere, the more heat is absorbed and retained, pushing Earth into a period of intense warming. Foote was the first of many scientists to show that CO2 is a heat-trapping gas of critical importance. Its concentration in the atmosphere acts like a thermometer for entire geological eras. More CO2 meant a warmer Earth, while less CO2 meant an ice age. Scientists can reconstruct past atmospheres using ancient air bubbles trapped in Antarctic ice cores. Even without these, other methods exist. Plants exchange gases through tiny pores called stomata. When CO2 levels are high, plants breathe more easily, so their leaves have fewer stomata. By counting stomata and fossilized leaves, we can infer CO2 levels in ancient times. Another way is through carbon isotopes. Plants prefer absorbing carbon-12, the most common isotope in the atmosphere. But when CO2 is scarce, they also take in more carbon-13. Fossilized plant tissues preserve these isotopes, allowing us to estimate CO2 concentrations. With these methods combined, scientists have created reliable records of Earth's atmosphere going back 500 million years. From this, the story of climate emerges, alternating greenhouse periods with high CO2 and icehouse periods with low CO2. About 500 million years ago, Earth's oceans were warm and clear, providing ideal conditions for an explosion of life. As life forms evolved and geological activity shifted, CO2 levels began to drop. Then came a sudden and dramatic fall in CO2, plunging the planet into unprecedented cold. This triggered the first mass extinction event in Earth's history, the Ordovician extinction, around 444 million years ago, wiping out 85% of species. At that time, nearly all life was still in the oceans, and plants had only just begun colonizing land. The survivors of this catastrophe became the ancestors of most animals alive today, including us. The world then looked very different. Most continents were joined into a single supercontinent called Gondwana. Experts believe the cooling may have begun with the rise of the Appalachian Mountains in North America, which absorbed massive amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere, rapidly cooling the planet. Sea levels dropped by tens of meters in a short time, leaving many species unable to adapt. Afterward, Earth underwent further climatic shifts, though none as catastrophic, until about 200 million years ago when warming resumed gradually. This trend continued into the age of the dinosaurs. By the late Cretaceous, the planet was much warmer than today, with tropical plants and animals thriving in regions that now seem unlikely. 75 million years ago, for example, northern Alaska was home to large plant-eating dinosaurs like Pachyrhinosaurus, which laid eggs in spring to take advantage of seasonal warmth. Although winters were long and dark, the climate was still mild compared to modern Arctic conditions. Fossils of both young and adult dinosaurs have been found across the Arctic, showing that they endured these harsh conditions. Some carnivorous dinosaurs there were smaller than their southern relatives, possibly adapting with large eyes to see better in months of darkness. During the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, around 55 million years ago, global temperatures rose further. Rainforests and subtropical forests expanded all the way to the Arctic Circle. Earth became a true greenhouse world, with average Arctic temperatures between 16 degrees and 24 degrees C. Yet while the poles flourished, equatorial regions became nearly uninhabitable, with average temperatures exceeding 40 degrees. But Earth's climate is never static. The long warming trend eventually gave way to cooling again, ushering in new challenges. One of the most transformative changes came from plants, grasses. Grasses, though simple, developed remarkable defenses such as tiny silica particles that wore down the teeth of herbivores. They spread rapidly because their seeds were dispersed by wind, not animals. First appearing in the Cretaceous, grasses truly exploded in the cooler climates afterward, forming the first grasslands. This open ecosystem changed everything. Herbivores evolved longer teeth to handle abrasive grasses, while new survival strategies emerged. Some animals formed large herds for protection. Others evolved greater speed to escape predators. In Africa, the cradle of humanity, grasslands and savannas spread alongside tropical forests and deserts, creating the diverse but fragmented ecosystems we see today. Rainfall became the decisive factor. Africa's different monsoon systems determined where rain would fall and in what quantity, shaping the continent's climate and ecosystems into their present form. It is not always possible to predict even 30 million years ago, when the entire continent was still a patchwork of many different environments. So what was Africa's climate and landscape like 30 million years ago, and why was it so different? At that time, Africa had alternating areas of forest and grassland. This diversity allowed our ancestors to access a variety of environments to exploit resources, instead of being confined to vast, uniform ecosystems. This was the world of primates such as Egyptopithecus, which lived in mangrove forests and inland forests in the region we now call Egypt. Although drier than the tropical forests at the Earth's equator, Africa's climate was still diverse and humid. However, not long after, Africa's climate and rainfall patterns changed drastically, not because of CO2, but due to shifts in other continents, especially Eurasia. About 50 million years ago, the Indian subcontinent collided with Eurasia, initiating sweeping changes to climate and landscapes in Africa. The collision of these tectonic plates caused long-lasting seismic activity before stabilizing. Volcanoes also emerged from fault lines created by the tectonic impact. Since both the Indian and Eurasian plates were relatively light, neither could easily subduct beneath the other. Instead, the collision created the majestic Himalayas. This mountain range restricted volcanic CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, while also giving rise to the Asian monsoon system, which dictated rainfall patterns across vast regions, including Africa. Over time, tropical forests retreated to areas with sufficient rainfall from monsoons, while grasslands expanded into wide savannas. Our primate ancestors then faced a difficult choice: follow the retreating forests or adapt to life in open grasslands. That decision eventually propelled humans further, allowing them to spread across almost every continent and conquer new territories. Imagine one day the Earth becoming so hot that asphalt melts and railway tracks warp. This is not a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie, but the reality of the North Atlantic coast of North America in 1911. In July, a brutal heat wave struck coastal cities, lasting for 11 days and setting record-high temperatures. For the first time, thousands of people were recorded sleeping on the streets at night, trying to escape the suffocating heat. That heat wave killed 2,000 people, with many driven mad by the unbearable conditions. Our world has never been consistently easy to live in. Even though humans are now everywhere, we still cannot fully cope with extreme heat. Surprisingly, our planet has actually been in a relatively mild and stable climate phase for the last 2.5 million years. Yet this does not mean we have avoided dramatic changes. Within that span, Earth was sometimes 4 degrees warmer, or 8 degrees colder than today. Our ancestors adapted to such extremes without air conditioning, using only natural mechanisms of survival. The simplest adaptation is thermoregulation, moving to cooler places, seeking shade, water, or airflow to cool the body. Over the long term, humans migrated away from unbearably hot climates. Physiologically, we developed traits to cope: less body hair, more sweat glands, and bipedalism. Standing upright reduced the body's exposure to direct sunlight, while increasing wind exposure. Still, even with these advantages, our bodies have limits. When core body temperature exceeds about 40 degrees C, muscles cramp, dehydration intensifies, blood circulation falters, and delirium or unconsciousness follows, often ending in death. Unlike some small primates, such as mouse lemurs, which can lower or even shut down their internal heating system through torpor, humans lack this ability. These animals allow their body temperature to fluctuate between 18 degrees and 37 degrees C, conserving energy by relying on environmental heat. Humans, however, cannot. This makes us far more vulnerable to heat stress, but Earth does not only warm, it also cools. When the planet cooled and tropical forests shrank, grasslands spread wider. Our ancestors had to travel farther for survival. Bipedalism proved invaluable, enabling long-distance travel with less energy than quadrupedal locomotion. Unlike most primates that stayed in trees, humans ventured onto open plains, relying not on the best adaptations, but on the smartest ones. Still, climate shifts occurred over millions, even tens of millions of years. Today, however, human activity has accelerated warming at an alarming rate. From 2013 to 2022, Earth's temperature rose by 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade due to human-caused emissions. If unchecked, this will add up to devastating levels. CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have risen steadily. According to Charles Keeling's measurements in the past 50 years, atmospheric CO2 increased by about 20%. The IPCC's fourth assessment report noted that global average temperature had already risen by 0.7 degrees compared to pre-industrial times. Even such a seemingly small increase has unleashed disasters: storms, floods, droughts, heat waves, and wildfires across the globe, with the poor suffering the most. Isn't this a clear warning to humanity? Earth will continue to change, especially now that human activity strongly influences the climate. The future likely holds far greater instability, unlike the relative calm of the last few million years. What will be the fate of Earth, or more precisely of humankind? As painted at the beginning, an apocalyptic scenario would slowly extinguish future generations, leaving humanity helpless. Yet, throughout evolution, climate was never the only challenge. The most crucial factor for survival has always been adaptation within the food chain. Our ancestors once fought fiercely for survival, transforming from prey into apex predators. That adaptability may yet be our greatest strength. Strange cries echoed through the silent night, amplified by the cave. Inside, a pack of hyenas was sharing the spoils of their hunt. 400 years ago, in limestone caves in China, many valuable fossils were discovered and preserved. They belonged to different animals: horses, turtles, rhinoceroses, and even Homo erectus, a human species that went extinct long ago. You may recall, not long ago, we had a video discussing how Homo erectus succeeded compared to other human species of the same era. They stood upright, used intelligent tools, and had brains comparable in size to ours today. The bones of Homo erectus tell us an astonishing story, the story of a fierce struggle for survival, in a world full of danger where you had only two choices: adapt and become a hunter, or remain slow and end up as prey. Back to the bones in the cave, something very strange was found. They were not buried underground but scattered across the cave floor. On many long bones and skulls were unusual marks: heavy impacts, broken limbs, and missing parts of the skull, evidence that something tried to reach the nutrient-rich bone marrow and brain. At first, this was thought to be proof of cannibalism, but after careful study, scientists realized the marks were not made by tools such as axes or sharp stones. Instead, they resembled bite marks. Yes, you heard right. They came from powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, and the culprit was Pachyrhina brevirostris, the giant short-faced hyena. It was the largest hyena ever known, weighing 110–190 kilos, standing 0.91 m tall, and about 1.7 meter long, the size of a lioness, and 3 times larger than modern hyenas. In its time, it was a terrifying predator high in the food chain. The giant hyena often dragged prey back to its den to feast. It would first crush the skull to reach the nutrient-rich brain, then move on to the marrow inside tough bones. These bone fragments testify to its incredible strength and ferocity. Not just in a few places, but across the Eurasian continent, the same pattern appeared. For much of history, our ancestors could not overcome such predators, always occupying a low position in the food chain. But how did our ancestors change that? That is the incredible journey from prey to hunter. Over 150 years ago, a boy named John W. was walking down a street in London, not far from the docks. The area was always bustling, with countless ships arriving daily from the tropics. Usually they brought essential goods, but that day, something unusual arrived: a fully grown Bengal tiger. Like many others, John was curious to see the exotic animal. When the tiger was unloaded and moved to its new cage, it was locked in an iron enclosure. However, it became agitated. Suddenly, it broke free and escaped. The street fell into chaos. The tiger targeted John, lunged at him, and easily dragged him away. It is easy to forget the sense of danger when humans live in almost absolute safety, believing we are masters of the world. But in nature, we are simply part of the food chain. In ecosystems, roles are clearly divided: plants, herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Humans today stand at the top, which perhaps makes us arrogant. Yet prehistoric evidence shows our role was once the complete opposite. John was dragged a long distance by the Bengal tiger, but he was lucky. The tiger's owner, Charles Z., noticed and rushed to save him. He bravely chased the beast, grabbed its neck, leapt onto its back, and wrestled with it. A passerby quickly brought an iron bar and struck the tiger's eyes 3 times. The beast finally released John but was still conscious and fought back. In that moment, John himself grabbed the iron bar and delivered a crushing blow to its head with all his strength. Terrified, the tiger retreated back into its cage. However, John's father later sued the rescuer, demanding 300 pounds in damages for the injured tiger. Not everyone was as lucky as John. Most victims of tiger attacks suffered fatal injuries. Throughout history, tigers have been considered extremely dangerous to humans. Between 1800 and 2009 in Southeast Asia, up to 400,000 people were killed by tigers. Even today, in India and Bangladesh, tigers still kill 50-60 people annually. One infamous tigress of Champawat, Nepal, caused horror by killing over 430 people before she was stopped. Why show you the danger of tigers? To remind you that wild beasts possess terrifying power beyond human control. Even when we stand at the top of the food chain, it does not mean we hold that position alone. To explain this, we look at the concept of trophic levels. This refers to the position of an organism in the food chain. At the first level are autotrophs, plants, bacteria, algae. Next come herbivores, level 2, then predators, level 3, and usually apex predators, level 4 or 5. Today, ecosystems are complex, with overlapping food webs. But 3 billion years ago, life was far simpler, dominated by autotrophic bacteria. Many types even formed layers of calcium carbonate, stacked on top of each other as they tried to grow upwards toward sunlight. Without predators, these bacteria lived an extremely peaceful life. Their only survival challenge was to gather enough sunlight, but that did not last forever, because consuming other organisms produced much more energy than synthesizing compounds from the environment by themselves. You may not believe it, but even today we still carry traces of those early heterotrophic organisms deep within the structure of our cells. All animals, plants and fungi differ from bacteria because they are made of complex cells that contain genetic material inside a separate compartment. At a certain point in history, when multicellular organisms began to appear, each cell took responsibility for specific biological functions. This paved the way for larger, more efficient organisms, especially those capable of gaining energy by consuming other living beings. Life continued this way until the Cambrian period, about 500 million years ago, when it suddenly exploded in diversity at an unprecedented scale. Species developed to hunt, but many also evolved tools to avoid being hunted. We can easily find examples: creatures with shells or with eyes to detect predators. With these evolutionary advances, the food chains of our early world became increasingly complex. Every organism sought the simplest way to survive, and our primate ancestors were no exception. About 10 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, in the dense canopy of ancient tropical forests, a small primate searched for food. It weighed less than 200 grams with a long face and very small eyes. Capel was truly an ancestral primate. It used its grasping toes to cling to branches, though its ankle bones suggest it did not often move across the ground. Modern primates use vision to locate food, but Capol lacked this ability. Instead, it relied primarily on its sense of smell to hunt. Still, it held a decent place on the food chain. At that time, the Earth was covered in thick rainforests, stretching all the way to the Arctic. This period gave flowering plants, the angiosperms, a chance to evolve. Today, many plants around the world trace their origins back to those earliest angiosperms. Their remarkable rise also meant that any animal capable of exploiting them could thrive. While Capol's small eyes and weak eyesight made spotting fruit from afar difficult, its superior nose allowed it to detect the scent of ripe fruit from a distance. Its suitable feet gave it the skills to climb trees and reach food. Eating fruit provided high energy while dispersing seeds farther, a mutually beneficial relationship. The evolution of angiosperms, especially fruits, carried enormous significance for our primate ancestors. Fruit offered a new abundant food source rich in sugar and energy. While most animals struggled to find sufficient energy, primates faced an even bigger challenge. Their brains demanded more. Traditionally, the ancestral primate diet contained two major components, plants and insects, but each posed drawbacks. Leaves, for example, contain complex molecules like cellulose that require long fermentation to digest. Small primates couldn't eat enough leaves or wait long enough for fermentation, so they could not rely on leaves as their main food. Insects, on the other hand, became the second option and provided a concentrated source of nutrients. Yet, for larger primates, anything weighing more than about 0.5 kilos, it was extremely difficult to gather enough insects to survive. You may notice that insect-eating primates are generally very small, while larger ones tend to eat leaves. Fruit solved these problems. Small primates could eat it because it digests easily, and in the right seasons fruit was abundant, giving larger primates the amounts they needed too. In the fierce struggle for food, some primates even turned to nectar or tree sap for energy. But climates eventually changed, ecosystems shifted, and diets once again adapted. Tens of millions of years after Capol searched for fruit in the ancient forests, our ancestors had changed drastically. Great apes, including all human relatives, showed remarkable growth in brain size. Securing enough energy became even harder. Fruits, plants, and insects were no longer sufficient. They gradually turned to a new, more efficient food source, meat. But without sharp teeth or claws, how could they obtain it? At Tanzania, archaeologists discovered primitive stone tools made by our ancestors. Although crude and simple, their sharp edges were extremely useful for cutting meat into pieces. These tools represented a giant leap forward in our ability to use technology. Yet they seemed more like food processing tools than hunting weapons, similar to how monkeys today use stones to crack open nuts. This suggests that our ancestors may have learned to process meat before they learned to hunt. Most likely, they accessed nutrients from meat and bones by scavenging leftovers from other predators. Meat scraps rarely provided enough, since hunters seldom left behind much. But bones told a different story. Few animals could crack bones to reach the marrow, except hyenas. After predators had eaten their fill, bones were often left behind, and our ancestors could claim them. But was it always that simple? Today, hyenas live only in Africa, so we seldom encounter them. But in the past, they lived worldwide. Bones were their food too, which forced our ancestors into competition. Most of the time, hyenas won, but not always. In southern Spain, archaeologists found evidence of one such prehistoric conflict. In 2001, they discovered the fossilized remains of a mammoth. Scientific analysis showed it had died naturally. Its teeth were too worn down to eat. But the real drama unfolded afterward. The carcass bore clear signs of scavengers, broken stone tools, hyena droppings, and missing legs. The absence of leg bones indicated they had been carried away by our ancestors. Legs contained both rich meat and marrow, and could easily be separated with stone tools. This showed that our ancestors had won, not through direct battle with hyenas, which they likely would have lost but simply by arriving first. Still, things did not always go so smoothly. About 27 million years ago, a small predator lurked in the dense forests of what we now call England. Its large round eyes took advantage of faint light to watch moths sipping tree sap. The moths had no idea they were being hunted. This allowed the predator to get close enough to deliver a fatal strike, finishing off Macrurus and enjoying its prey. But that was only the beginning of a longer story. Behind it, Macrurus itself was also prey for another hidden hunter in the shadows. Its life was just as fragile as the moths it once fed upon. The next part of the story is told by Macrurus's bones. Tiny jawbones found with traces of acid erosion revealed that they had remained for quite some time in the stomach of a predator. The absence of scratches or breakage on the bones showed it had been swallowed whole. All other evidence pointed to a group of predators. Owls. Owls may not seem terrifying to humans today, but in ancient times they likely struck fear into small primates. Many fossilized primate bones in Europe and the Americas show acid marks, suggesting they were swallowed and later regurgitated. Since owls cannot digest bones completely, in some way we might even thank owls, because this regurgitation helped preserve a more complete fossil record of early primates. Even now, many bird species continue to hunt primates. One example is the harpy eagle, one of the largest raptors in the world and the biggest ever found in the Americas. Its habitat lies in both lowland and highland tropical rainforests. Harpy eagles have black backs, white or striped bellies, pale gray heads with feathered tufts resembling a crown, and black and gray tails. As apex predators, harpy eagles hunt nearly all small to medium-sized animals, including sloths, monkeys, porcupines, squirrels, anteaters, and even raccoons. But in fact, over 50% of their diet consists of primates. They can kill prey equal to their own body weight, though carrying large animals back to the nest is difficult. This means that being heavier than the eagle itself reduced your chances of being prey. Growing larger was an extremely effective defense against predatory birds. Still, many primates, both today and in the past, remained small. Why? Small size allowed them to find enough food to survive. Even our early hominin ancestors were relatively small-bodied for a long time. The first large-bodied hominins comparable to modern humans only appeared about 3.5 million years ago, with Australopithecus. But being larger than an eagle did not guarantee safety. Other predators still lurked. In Africa, baboons weighing 40 kilos were still on the leopard's menu. Leopards, nocturnal and stealthy, often attacked baboons in their sleep. Their hunting success rate was so high that it rendered many alarm strategies useless. Leopards proved willing to overcome any obstacle to secure food, especially primates. Having appeared around 6 million years ago, leopards had hunted our ancestors for much of prehistory. Prehistoric Africa was a land full of dangers. Predators not only shared the same environment with us but also with each other, meaning our ancestors often faced multiple threats at once. In the water, crocodiles were constant deadly hazards. Unlike today, where some people raise crocodiles as pets or wear them as belts and luxury handbags, for early humans approaching them was never wise. They kept as far away as possible. One particularly terrifying predator was Crocodylus thorbjarnarsoni, an extinct crocodile that once lived in the Turkana Basin of Kenya, and closely related to Crocodylus anthropophagus of Tanzania. Living between 2 and 4 million years ago, it was the largest crocodile ever to exist, reaching over 8.2 meters, 2 meters longer than the Nile crocodile. Fossil evidence shows these massive reptiles actively hunted our early ancestors. It makes sense. Prehistoric humans had to approach rivers to drink water, making them easy prey. On the savanna, the giant hyena Pachyrhinacuta was another major threat, as discussed earlier, but even that was not the only one. If you think grizzly bears and polar bears today are terrifying, imagine what our ancestors faced with the giant short-faced bear. This species lived from 1.8 million to about 11,000 years ago. Standing on its hind legs, it could reach 3.7 meters tall, weigh up to 1.2 tons, and run at 50-70 km/h. Like polar bears, it was a hyper-carnivore, consuming almost only meat. Even bison, horses, and antelopes fell victim to it, let alone small, fragile early humans. From these examples, it's clear that increasing body size alone could not protect our ancestors from predators. So how did they manage to survive, thrive, and climb to the very top of the food chain? The clues may lie in the behavior of modern primates. Perhaps our ancestors used different environments at different times. For example, if giant eagles hunted in the forest during the day, humans could move out into the open savanna to forage. Thorny acacia bushes could also provide natural defensive shelters. And finally, after countless years of hiding and escaping, a miracle arrived, the weapon that changed everything: fire. Mastering fire permanently altered human destiny and our place in the food chain. Fire allowed us to cook food, unlocking far more energy from meat and plants and lessening dependence on raw scavenging. We could now absorb nutrition from cooked meat far more efficiently. Fire also enabled the creation of more advanced weapons and tools. We still don't know exactly when humans first discovered fire or how they transitioned from fearing it to using it daily. Some scientists suggest our ancestors may have first encountered wildfires, scavenging cooked animals afterward. Natural forest fires were common, so it's not hard to imagine early humans wandering through burnt landscapes, picking up roasted food. Gradually, they learned not only to take advantage of fire but also to preserve and control it, perhaps carrying burning branches or using smoldering roots as natural ovens. This marked the beginning of humanity's mastery of fire. Weapons developed later only enhanced an ability that had already become dominant with fire. From that moment, humans began to truly dominate the planet, claiming vast territories and driving away wild intruders. Our influence reshaped herbivore populations, which in turn altered entire ecosystems and carnivore behavior. We had ascended to a new trophic level, above all others. No longer did we struggle upward through the food chain. We now restructured it ourselves. The way humans have pushed countless species to the brink of extinction is proof of the unprecedented power we wield, but perhaps that power is being misused. Hopefully in the future, humanity will use its strength to live in harmony with nature instead of recklessly reshaping it. Only then can life in all its diversity endure. The endless cycle of eating and being eaten has always driven evolution forward. Predator-prey struggles shaped species into what they are today. Now standing at the very peak with no rivals threatening our survival, the question arises, will humans continue to evolve? I believe the answer is yes, but the driving force will no longer come from the hunt for food. Instead, it will come from the environment we ourselves have created. Human evolution now also manifests culturally and physically. Our bodies are becoming smaller, more refined, aided by technology that removes the need for brute strength. While our closest relatives, chimpanzees, still have large teeth and strong jaws for breaking hard objects, humans no longer need such features. We remain a part of nature in countless ways, and no matter how advanced we become, one thing is certain: evolution will never stop. In the final chapter of this series, we will face the ultimate test our planet sets for us, a last challenge that shaped humanity's rise to power as we know it today. Warm sunlight pierced through the forest canopy, creating a radiant scene below. On a tree branch, a small lizard dozed dreamily in the golden light. Its scales shimmered, chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. Everything seemed peaceful, until something enormous crashed through the trees. The little lizard snapped awake and darted away just in time, as a massive hairy hand grasped the branch where it had been resting. That arm belonged to a creature standing 3 meters tall and weighing over 300 kilograms. Gigantopithecus. Its size was double that of a modern gorilla. Gigantopithecus paid no attention to the tiny reptile. What it needed was food, lots of it. With such bulk came nearly constant hunger, and in a changing world where resources were growing scarce, this giant was struggling to survive. Its own kind had already stripped the land of much of its food, forcing it to keep moving in search of sustenance. After wandering, the forest began to thin, giving way to open ground. The giant stopped at the forest's edge, gazing into the unfamiliar expanse. With a frustrated roar, it turned back, continuing its fight for survival in forests that were shrinking day by day. You might think this beast lived 2 million years ago, but evidence suggests Gigantopithecus persisted until as recently as 200,000 years ago. Meanwhile, hominin lineages had already been present in China for more than 1 million years. This means that our ancestors once shared the same air, walked the same paths, and possibly even encountered this giant. Yet today, they are gone, and we remain. But the extinction of Gigantopithecus was not unique. Long before their disappearance, the primate family tree had already been drastically pruned. If we look back 10 to 20 million years, the world was astonishingly different. During the Miocene epoch, primates flourished. They reached their peak in terms of numbers, diversity, and geographical range. Yet in the modern world, primates are but a shadow of their former selves. Most of their branches have withered away into extinction, in ways still not fully understood. What caused this collapse? Why did so many of our relatives vanish into the oblivion of time, while our own lineage rose up to dominate the earth? This is the central question of history's final chapter. Why did we survive, when so many others did not? A cold morning in 1798. On an ordinary chilly morning in 1798, a mysterious sealed crate arrived at the British Museum. The label showed it had traveled thousands of kilometers from the distant coasts of Australia. Scholars eagerly gathered around, expecting treasures worthy of one of the world's greatest museums. But what emerged was no treasure. Instead, they saw a creature so bizarre it seemed almost alien. It had brown fur like a mammal, a flat beaver-like tail, yet also a duck's bill and webbed feet. This animal is what we now know as the platypus. The platypus became a key piece in understanding evolutionary theory. Unlike most mammals, it lays eggs, a trait inherited from an ancient lineage that stretches back tens of millions of years. To when dinosaurs still ruled the earth, today, platypuses live only in freshwater rivers and streams of eastern Australia and Tasmania. Yet fossil evidence shows that 65 million years ago, their ancestors lived as far away as South America. This suggests that they once spread widely across the supercontinent Gondwana. Over time, however, nearly all of their relatives disappeared. Only the platypus and 4 echidna species remain, the last living egg-laying mammals. More surprisingly, within its genus, the platypus is the sole survivor. What does this tell us? The lesson is clear. No matter how successful a species may seem, extinction is always a possibility. Some suffer only a collapse in diversity, others vanish entirely. Our planet is home to millions of life forms, over 435,000 known plant species, 150,000 fungi, and 1.2 million described animals. Yet scientists estimate that 99.9% of all species that ever lived are now extinct. Extinction happens when a species' death rate outpaces its birth rate, often because it cannot adapt fast enough to environmental change, or is outcompeted by evolving predators and rivals. But fossils also reveal astonishing creatures of the past. Discovering a new species is the dream of every paleontologist, and sometimes reality surpasses even imagination. In 2007, researchers uncovered the fossil of a massive ape in Anatolia, central Turkey. It belonged to a new genus called Anatiluvius. While finding a new genus doesn't always tell us much about the species within it, this discovery sparked a 16-year investigation. By late 2023, scientists revealed an extraordinary conclusion. Anatiluvius belonged to the branch of the evolutionary tree that produced chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and us. This ape lived about 8.7 million years ago, representing a lineage experimenting with survival strategies in a changing world. Some of its descendants likely migrated into Africa, eventually giving rise to the great apes and, ultimately, to humans. The time of Anatiluvius was also one of the most dramatic periods for primates. Over 23 million years ago, the Miocene began as an epoch of sweeping transformation. Global temperatures averaged about 5 degrees warmer than today. Rising seas from melting ice drowned vast regions that are now modern coastlines. Dense forests spread across both hemispheres, shaping habitats and driving evolution in profound ways. Through the modern lens looking back through a modern lens, the Miocene stands out as a transitional moment in Earth's story. It was as if nature itself had decided it was time to redecorate the planet's landscape. Many ancient lineages came to an end, leaving behind vast opportunities for newer, more modern forms of plants and animals. Among them, a new family of primates emerged, splitting off from their monkey-like ancestors. Although their lineage began early in the Miocene with a creature known as proconsul, it wasn't until the middle of the epoch that these apes became fully distinct. Around 13 million years ago, Earth was home to astonishing new species of apes with far more flexible shoulders than the earliest monkeys. They swung through the branches of Europe and Asia, thriving in these forests. Scientists estimate that more than 100 species of great apes lived during the Miocene, most of their diversity arising in the middle of the epoch. But why did this period see such a dramatic surge in apes, especially great apes? The answer is not mysterious if you've followed the earlier chapters of this series. Climate. Yet here, climate's influence revealed itself through a deeper biological process: evolutionary radiation. This is when a common ancestor diversifies into multiple lineages, each adapting to new ecological niches. A related idea is adaptive radiation, when environmental change opens new opportunities, driving organisms to evolve and fill those niches. Darwin himself noticed this when studying the diversity of finches on the Galapagos Islands. In the Miocene, global forests covered much of Earth's surface, particularly during the early and middle epochs. These forests, however, were far from uniform. Each region presented unique environments. This variety triggered evolutionary radiation. As the climate gradually cooled, new habitats arose, creating fresh ecological niches. Apes responded with remarkable adaptability. For example, Dryopithecus and Pierolopithecus adapted to temperate forests of Western Europe. Kenyapithecus thrived in mixed forests of Africa, the Middle East, and the northern Indian subcontinent. Meanwhile, Oreopithecus made its home in swampy forests of ancient Italy. The Miocene was, in many ways, a great ecological experiment. Primates spread into new territories, adjusting to different lifestyles. Those in grassland forest mosaics evolved to exploit new foods, gradually losing traits tied to strict tree-dwelling life. Apes in swampy habitats developed features suited to harvesting aquatic resources. Even today, some monkeys use hard tools to crack open shellfish, an echo of those ancient adaptations. Thus, the explosion of ape diversity was driven by environmental variety. It was truly a Planet of the Apes era. But how could so many species coexist without wiping each other out in competition? The answer lies in a concept called niche partitioning. On Africa's savannas today, different grazing animals share the same ecosystem without direct conflict. Zebras graze tough grasses at mid-height, antelopes prefer tender shoots, while giraffes, with their long necks, feed from treetops unreachable by others. By dividing resources, species avoid direct competition. The Miocene apes did the same. Excavations in Turkey revealed not only Anadaluvius, but at least 3 other ape genera living in the same region. Each developed unique traits, carving out separate niches. Anadaluvius likely spent more time on the ground, browsing low shrubs and bushes. Gryptopithecus, based on its jaw and skeletal structure, thrived in the lower canopy, eating fruits, nuts, and occasionally small vertebrates and insects. Auranopithecus stood taller, exploiting higher foliage much like modern orangutans do. Together, these species paint a vivid picture of adaptation and coexistence. Each lived in its own world, resilient and flexible as the landscape shifted. The Miocene, then, was not only a planet of apes by sheer numbers, but also a time of extraordinary evolutionary experimentation. Compared with today, the difference is striking. Climate change eventually turned forests into grasslands, shrinking habitats. Many Miocene apes, including descendants of Anadaluvius, migrated south into Africa, following forests retreating toward the equator. But survival in this changing world was not guaranteed. New species arose, with adaptations far beyond their predecessors. Some even flourished in the expanding open grasslands. Their greatest innovation was upright walking, bipedalism, which allowed them to meet the challenges of an open, complex landscape. This moment marked one of evolution's most remarkable turning points, a discovery in Hong Kong. 1935 Hong Kong in the 1930s was a bustling port city, alive with markets and traditional shops. One afternoon in 1935, 2 men entered a small herbal medicine store. One was local, the other a Westerner, German paleontologist Gustav von Königswald. He had spent 5 years working in East Asia and was now in Hong Kong, seeking something unusual. Among jars of dried herbs and strange preserved animals, the shopkeeper eventually returned with a tray of objects, small, stone-like teeth of various colors. Locals called them dragon teeth. In truth, they were fossilized mammal teeth. Königswald had been collecting such specimens across Asia, hoping they would advance the study of evolution. But one of these teeth was unlike any he had seen before. It belonged to a gigantic primate, never before described, Gigantopithecus. Based on scattered fossils like this, scientists reconstructed an ape twice the size of a modern gorilla. Gigantopithecus was a reminder of the immense diversity of Miocene apes, and also a sobering lesson. Even the largest, strongest species are not immune to extinction, but how extinction unfolds can vary. Sometimes it comes suddenly, through catastrophe. Other times it creeps slowly, as in the case of Gigantopithecus, whose decline was gradual. Similarly, the great diversity of Miocene apes disappeared between 5 and 10 million years ago, victims of climate shifts and shrinking habitats. To understand the scale of this loss, we must look again to the Miocene, especially its turbulent middle and late stages. The end of the Miocene, extinction and opportunity. Look closely at the fossils of tiny marine organisms. Their shells, preserved in ocean floor sediments, record in fine detail the temperature and chemistry of Earth's past. From them, scientists have learned that the mid-Miocene was marked by a significant global warming phase, often called the mid-Miocene climatic optimum. Yet this warm interval did not last. Chemical signals reveal that soon after, temperatures plunged by 5–10 degrees C. The exact cause remains uncertain, but shifts in Earth's orbit, the expansion of polar ice sheets, and changes in ocean circulation likely played major roles. One thing is certain, Whenever Earth's climate shifts dramatically, life faces extinction pressures. The later Miocene brought colder, drier conditions. Rainfall declined, humidity dropped, and ecosystems based on lush forests began to collapse. For the Miocene apes, the planet delivered an ultimatum: adapt or die. Ancient landscapes reveal elephants, rhinos, and antelopes appearing, clear signs that dense forests were giving way to seasonal grasslands and savannas. For fruit and leaf-dependent apes, this was disastrous. Fruit grew scarce in dry seasons. Some clung to shrinking forests, barely surviving. Others ventured into open habitats. Among these pioneers were the earliest hominins, our direct ancestors. Emerging 5-7 million years ago, they were not merely survivors but innovators. Their defining adaptation was upright walking, which allowed them to navigate open ground and exploit new resources. It's tempting to think species go extinct because they failed to change. In truth, for many Miocene apes, leaving the trees was simply impossible. Life on the ground was a death sentence for species specialized over millions of years to arboreal existence. European apes like Dryopithecus and Gracopithecus vanished around 8 to 10 million years ago, coinciding with severe habitat loss. Their extinction was not only the result of changing landscapes, but also their inability to adapt quickly enough. In Asia, apes like Lufengpithecus and Gigantopithecus survived a little longer, but ultimately faced the same fate. This pattern, survival for some, extinction for others, has repeated throughout Earth's history. We see it even in recent times, from the rivalry between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals 40,000 years ago, to modern ecological battles like gray squirrels displacing red squirrels. The principle remains unchanged. Species better suited to present conditions always prevail. This is a sobering reminder. Survival is not about being the strongest or smartest, but about being able to change. Consider Neanderthals again. For years, we assumed they went extinct because they were less intelligent than Homo sapiens. But research suggests other factors: slower reproduction rates, higher energy demands, and smaller scattered populations. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens reproduced faster, required fewer calories, and formed larger cooperative groups. Even if climate change was the main driver, Neanderthals might have survived in small numbers, if not for being outcompeted by our ancestors. This is the essence of competitive exclusion. Two species competing for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. Eventually, one must vanish. In forests of the Miocene, fruit-dependent apes faced relentless pressure. Conflict was inevitable until only the most adaptable remained. Gigantopithecus was among the later victims, disappearing about 200,000 years ago. Despite its size, it was highly specialized, its diet limited much like today's giant pandas. As forests shrank, so did its food supply. Dental microfossils even reveal signs of chronic stress from starvation around 295,000 years ago. Most Miocene apes shared the same fate. Today, only 7 non-human great ape species remain, a mere shadow of their once great diversity. Their survival is no less miraculous than our own. The story continues with us. For millions of years, our ancestors competed with rival lineages, sometimes winning, sometimes barely surviving. And yet, remarkably, we endure. Even Neanderthals live on in us. Fragments of their DNA remain within our genomes. In a sense, they never fully vanished. When Miocene forests dwindled, countless ape species disappeared. But their extinction opened ecological space for something new: the hominins. By 6 to 7 million years ago, species like Sahelanthropus chidensis were already distinct from other apes. They lived across diverse habitats, savannas, wetlands, open grasslands, showing an adaptability unmatched by their relatives. Their secret? Bipedalism. Though not yet perfected, this ability to walk on 2 legs freed their hands, setting the stage for tool use. By 2 million years ago, species like Homo habilis and Homo erectus were crafting tools, migrating farther than ever before, and exploiting resources once thought unreachable. Where Gigantopithecus perished due to dietary rigidity, Homo sapiens thrived through flexibility. Innovation, such as weapons for hunting large prey, enabled us to conquer diverse habitats and expand across the globe. The extinction of Miocene apes is not just a tragedy. It is a vital chapter in our own story. Despite staggering losses in primate diversity, our lineage persisted, carrying forward the torch of survival. The few great apes that remain, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, are themselves survivors of that long struggle. Perhaps the next great wave of extinction is still ahead. If so, we too may face another test of survival. And with that, we close this 5-part journey through human evolution, from surviving cataclysms to adapting across ages to inheriting the legacy of vanished kin. Are humans truly nature's greatest achievement? Or are we merely one more branch in a vast ongoing experiment? Thank you for watching, and until we meet again in the next series, may you have a peaceful day.